So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the price of being human, I guess. Um, and so obviously, as you guys know, I cover politics a lot, and this very recently, something's happened where someone passed away, someone I know, and I wasn't especially close with this person, but they were always friendly. They were always a very kind person. At least I thought they were a very kind person. A person who checks on others, and those are the people I would always want to be most um, careful of. In sometimes people we go out and you check on other people in order to kind of hide whatever we're facing, and it's always difficult. But it changed my perspective on things. On the channel, I guess. The way I kind of tackle people. And I see. A lot of politics is very toxic. And I don't know if I would ever be a person who would help detoxify it, because it's not who I am. I am an incredibly negative person to the point where I will look at the worst outcomes in order to look at how to avoid them, rather than looking at the best outcomes and how to get there. And that's a character flaw that I have, and that's it's okay. I can accept that, because I think in politics it's better to be pessimistic because of the quality of politicians that we have, especially in England. I'd very famously, I think, well, I'd say that Labour weren't going to be that good. I talked about it a lot last year, and there were a lot of people who were very wrong, and they were very condescending and very mean about it. And what do you do with these sorts of people when it comes time to ask them, did you get everything you voted for? Did you manage to get hired by the party that you worked so hard to elect? Did you get everything you wanted, within the first year of government? Because we knew these guys weren't that bright. We knew Starmer wasn't a very good politician. We knew Rachel Reeves had no idea, and we knew Morgan McSweeney was not the tactical genius he was portrayed as. So I ask you, with those three things in mind, is this really, was this ever really going to work out? And the ones who, how do you deal with the people who are wrong? Do you say, we don't listen to you in the future? Do we say, you're not really that good at your job? Do we criticize them? And to what degree do we criticize them? Because there are levels here. You can criticize them as, their takes were bad, or you could criticize them as people and ask what their motivations were. But do you create a more negative space by doing that? And is it a price worth paying to do that? Because at the end of the day, like I coexist in a space with a lot of other people. Some of them are not that bright, and some of them are disingenuous. How do I untangle the two? Do I look at the ones who looked for employment by the current government, and when they didn't get them, they've started to turn on them very slowly? Or do I say they were naive and silly, despite the fact that some of these people have lived on this earth another 10 to 15 years, showing you that age isn't everything when it comes to knowledge? How do we treat these people? And this is the question I'm throwing to you guys, the audience, because do we what do I gain by criticizing these people when I know they're wrong? I know certain people that are in the space that have mental health issues that can't take criticism properly, but are more than happy to throw stones at others. And the saying goes, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. But am I wrong if I start throwing stones towards their house when they've decided to attack me, whether directly or indirectly? Now, what is this is the price of being human. At the end of the day, to be flawed, to accept that we are limited in who we are as people. And for politicians, that's okay. I'm not expecting them to get everything right, but I'm expecting them to get some things right. I'm expecting the people in Labour to not be aping on reform. At least I can be forgiving of mistakes, and I think we should be forgiving to an extent of mistakes. Such is to be human. But the degrees to the criticism, that's the thing I'm struggling with right now, because as I said, when someone passes, everything else becomes insignificant. If I said something and I criticized one of these people in the space, and they passed away or something happened to them, I would feel awful, especially if I had any part to play in it, or if I had any thought, I thought I had any part to play in it, which is selfish. It is very selfish, in that sense. But again, I'm not here to attack people or make their mental health worse. But how do we tackle people who are disingenuous in the space, who genuinely are bad faith actors? Do I leave them alone? and let them pollute the well that we drink from? Or, is it necessary to be that person? Because you can be the person who is the anti-hero character, the one who calls out others, the one who has no fear in that, but you have to also be prepared to be attacked by others, to be shunned by others, to be ignored, sometimes by others, and it's difficult to be that. And I think for some of these people who cry about not earning enough by being on the left or whatever, is like, you shouldn't be on the left because of money. You should be on the left because you think this is the correct place to be politically. And I think maybe it is my jealousy speaking here, but you should be grateful that you can do this full time and that is enough to fund your living. And that, because maybe I'm bitter that if things played out differently for me, I could have had a much different life, and I could have been YouTube full time, and I could have done a lot more with the time I've been given. But at the same time, there are people in this world who are envious of the life I have. Saw a story the other day, and I think especially with the Gaza conflict, Israel's invasion of Gaza, their kind of mass, their genocide of these people, and my heart breaks. We had a story recently where journalists from Al Jazeera killed in Gaza. People who would who people would give up so much to have the freedoms that I take for granted. I can criticize this government as much as I want. I can call Starmer an absolute fraud. I can say so many things about him without risk of persecution, without risk of being killed, without a risk of feeling like any government backlash will happen. And yet these people here, the journalists, the bravest people around. Some of them, I think firefighters are the bravest people we have, and after that it's the journalists in war zones, because these are people without minimal protections, and they're being killed by Israel in this situation. Four Al Jazeera journalists were killed in an Israeli airstrike, and I feel like an obligation to them to at least cover it, because what's the bare minimum I can do as a person? At least discuss what's going on over there, despite how painful it is, because this is their lives at the end of the day. They're being killed just for being where they were born, really, in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you believe Israel, it's tragic. So what obligation do we owe others who would do anything to have the lives that we have to do, to cross dangerous oceans and deserts and things like that in order to get a taste of the freedom that we have? Do we owe them an obligation to at least try, to do better, to make the most of the democracy we do have, as flawed as it is? Because these are people who would give anything, across the Middle East, across Africa, across Asia, to have any sense of the democracy we have. Such is life, really, where you can have a difficult life by Western standards. You can have a really tough situation, but by global standards, your life is a cakewalk. And people will say that sometimes to you. You have a house, a bed, food, which is correct. But then sometimes you want more, and you kind of, your brain doesn't function when you put into perspective how easy your life is compared to others. It's difficult. Like, it's difficult to kind of comprehend that. It's difficult to understand what these people go through. It's difficult to know sometimes what is the right thing to say and what isn't the right thing to say. Like people protesting so much in support of Palestine action, being arrested for it, which is the government's decision to organize them as a terrorist group. But I think that was the wrong decision by the government. You're being arrested in this country for what they believe in, and supporting an organization which is supporting the people of Palestine who are being killed by the IDF. It's hard to put into words what I'm trying to convey here, I think, but it's just, to what degree do we discuss topics? To what degree do we go after the people, the perpetrators, the pundits, the people who do the analysis? What is fair? To what degree do we call them out? What is fair? Because again, there are a lot of good people in this space. I would argue, because I'm arrogant, that I'm in the top two and I ain't the second one. That's for sure. But I think it's difficult, because I think a lot of these people do deserve criticism, especially for the way they condescend, the arrogance especially that they had, just over a year ago, to now crumble into a bunch of people with no movement. The ones who said that they had all these plans, all these grand ideas of stuff they would do in the Labour Party, and they ran away at the first chance that they got. As soon as times got tough, as soon as they got ignored, they ran, they left. and now they criticize others who want to set up other parties, who want to look outside of the Labour Party. To what extent, what degree do we criticize them? What do we say to these people? How much do we criticize them? That's the kind of question I'm kind of posing to the audience here, because again, I'm just not sure sometimes. Honestly, I'm just not that sure. So I just, with journalists, Israel trying to claim that they work for Hamas, but Israel claim everyone works for Hamas. Nearly 270 journalists and media workers have been killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza in the 22-month war. About 13 journalists every month. These are the people who are covering this conflict and trying to give us the information, and they're being killed for it. And it's difficult when you can feel sad about British politics. You can feel sad about the state of the government. You can be angry about it, but at least I know deep down that I'll always be safe from them. Whereas these people are being killed by, yes, a foreign government, but this is their domestic area that some of these people are being killed in, their homes, effectively. And it's difficult, to understand what, like with the channel, the direction of it. Am I doing it for the right things? When I call out these other people, I know this video is quite muddled, but it's just what do I say? What's the criticism I offer? Do I do it for the right reasons? Do I do it because these are the people polluting the world? These are the people who their arrogance is attacking others, the ones that are trying to make the world a better place. Because this will be a lot of nerd references, but that's who I am. It's what I grew up around, and it just makes sense.
So why are you here then? Why do you continue to follow your orders while your superiors betray you? Why did you?
And this is a question you could ask of: why do you continue to lobby for the Labour government? Why do you continue to carry water for the Labour government despite them doing everything that you don't want them to do? Or to me, why do I continue to cover these news topics despite it being so toxic and kind of frustrating for me? Is it because I do it for the right reasons in the hopes that things become better and to document things, or because I like being mean to people? I like being vicious to people who I think deserve it.
You come here. Well, I'll tell you then. You enjoy all the killing. That's why. What? Are you denying it? Haven't you already killed most of my comrades?
Do I enjoy calling people washed? Do I enjoy being allowed to do the research and then just call out people who haven't done the work? And for that, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure on that. And this kind of clip just kind of talks about you got a main character who thought they were in it for the right reasons, and they're just not sure anymore.
Armstrong! I said my sword was a tool of justice, not used in anger, not used for vengeance. But now I'm not so sure.
I've had days with the channel where I'll see someone with just a really bad take, really bad, really disingenuous, something where I'll listen to it and I'll just get really annoyed to the point where I want to start discussing it. I want to start making videos again. And that's where I'm not sure if I am in this for the right reasons at times. And, no one can deny, like I am good at this. That's the problem. Can you find me a person who has done as good a video as, the Labour Party? Is sanity the price to pay for power? No. Can you find? There's not many. There's not many who could do what I did, especially with the volume I was putting out at the time, as well.
I fail to see the logic here. Senate. The price to pay for power.
And with the stuff, it's tough. Like, I've balanced so much, in terms of I balance, my personal life where I try and work hard, especially at work, to kind of help others and dealing with the stuff that they've got, because that's what my job is basically now, to the point where it is exhausting. And then you try and balance being the person I am, kind of my outside of the channel, and then you've got the alter ego, which is the channel. I don't know, and I just don't know if I know as a person now I am what I want to be, but I think for the channel I'm just not sure, and that's where the dilemma is.
Stark asked for a savior and settled for a slave.
I suppose we are both disappointments.
It's just the uncertainty, you know, and it is, as I said, it is part of the human experience.
You are only human.
And some days I'm not sure, you know, how much I love doing this channel. You know, this to me is an outlet. It helps me get through so much, and especially when I didn't have a lot going on in my life and things have changed. My life is much busier now. There's much more to do, much more social than it's ever been. And I think that's the thing that's maybe changed. Maybe I don't have the desire to do this anymore, you know. And as I said, you know, I'm good at this, I would say. You know, like there are some people who are really good in the space, but I'd say I'm definitely up there. And that's what makes it difficult sometimes when you don't have the success that you wanted or thought you deserved. But you know, that I can live with. I think I can live with it, knowing that I am good at this. But you know, the final clip, I guess, and what we're going to end on is this, and I think this personifies it quite well, because it is I am finding it difficult to balance everything. But if I don't call this stuff out, you know, who will at that point? You know, who is gonna do that? You know, especially when you see people who are so disingenuous at times. Because I've seen others with, you know, I do question their intentions at times, because when I see the stuff they cover in the way they cover it, I can see that they've come through with an agenda of being an aggressor, of attacking others, and I don't like it at times. But I wonder if I'm like that as well, or if others view me like that. So this is the last thing we're going to play for the day.
And I think, am I that predictable? I'm tired. I've been fighting this guy for nearly 12 hours straight. I haven't had anything to eat or drink. He's not even tired, but I am. I'm hurt, and I'm tired, and I want to go home, and I want to sleep, and I don't want to be here, and I think, can I let this one go? Can I let it be someone else's problem? Just for a minute, so I can rest. No, I can't. But I wish I could. God, I wish I could.